G'day and welcome to another Madcap music review. I'm Madcapsules and today I'm looking at Macro, the new album from Jinjer, which was released on October 25th via Napalm Records. Now Jinjer is not a band I had previously given much attention to for a couple of reasons, but I decided to look at them after seeing a post from another publication, I think it was Metal Sucks, suggesting that Jinjer was potentially the next big thing. I didn't want fear of missing out to set in, so here I am, reviewing the new one by Jinjer. So what were those reasons I didn't want to check them out initially? Firstly, when I had a look at them probably about a year ago, I kind of felt like maybe they were a metalcore band, and as you'll come to learn about me, I really don't like metalcore. I like a lot of extreme metal, but for some reason, metalcore is not for me. I'll go into this one day, I imagine, in detail, but in brief, I feel that the way that most metalcore bands approach mixing clean singing with growls is bad. Most feel like punk rock bands that throw in some growls, and it really just clashes really badly in my opinion. I don't like it. Just like fingernails on a blackboard for some people, it just doesn't work for me. Clearly, I'm kind of picky when it comes to having both clean singing and death growls in the same song or in the same music. That's one of the reasons why I avoided Jinjer initially. Secondly, I noticed that many writers would refer to Jinjer as a progressive metal band. And this for me was also a bad word for a while, which was mainly due to me really misunderstanding what progressive music was and labeling all progressive bands as wanky bullshit. In a way, progressive music is wanky bullshit, but some of it is brilliant wanky bullshit. In fact, some of my favourite music is generally labelled progressive rock or progressive metal, and I wasn't aware of this until I started looking some of those bands up. As a result, I realised I had it all wrong. So I then went out and listened to some other bands I'd avoided as a result. So recently I listened to Opeth's In Corda Venenum and Between the Buried and Me's Automata 1 and 2, and as a result of both, or all three of those albums really, I realised there was a lot of good music I was listening out on. So here we are. Anyway, Jinjer. For those that don't know, Jinjer is a Ukrainian metal band that broke out internationally with their previous album, King of Everything. Part of their initial appeal is their singer, Tatiana Shamilyuk. I am hoping I pronounced it even a little bit correct. Apologies, Tatiana. Who can go from soulful, clean singing to brutal, brutal death growls at the drop of a hat. It's really pretty impressive. This is the band's fourth album since the band formed back in 2009, and overall, it's a pretty good one. Taken at face value, everything presented in the album is of high quality. From the instrument work, to the singing, to composition, to lyrics, production, you name it, it's all pretty damn good. However, I also felt that some of this was inconsistent at times. Take the production, for example. In the majority of tracks on the album, every instrument and sound effect sits exactly where I feel it needs to within the track. But there are one or two tracks where I felt the drums were too high. Clearly, this must have been a deliberate choice on behalf of the producer, but personally I felt as if it may have been the wrong one in some of those cases. Then again, I do have my own limitations, and I will get into that a little bit later. So, Macro starts off with a bang, and its most radio-friendly track on the album. So, On the Top is the name of the song, it's the most recent single, and it has some catchy hooks, some catchy lyrics, and compared to the rest of the album is quite easy listening. The other tracks, though, requires much more attention from the listener. It's not necessarily something you can put on in the background while you do something else. It almost demands to be listened to actively. Not necessarily a bad thing, and this is also often the case with progressive metal, so there you go. On that note, though, I was initially hesitant to agree that Jinjer was a progressive metal band, but I've listened to the album a bunch of times now, probably 5 to 10 times, and I can say that yes, this is easily the best way to refer to their sound. The band really aims to experiment with their sound across the board, not just in terms of technicality, but in other areas as well. Judgment and Punishment, for example, throws some reggae into the mix. The Prophecy is a mishmash of technical chaos. Album closer Perennial, which is actually spelled backwards for whatever reason, brings some emotional whispering in for good measure. And Retrospective includes lyrics sung in the band's native language as well as in English, both sung cleanly and in death growls, and I must say this really adds some raw emotion to the album, and clearly this is one of my preferred tracks. So on that note, it was pretty hard for me to choose some recommended tracks here. None of the songs are bad in any way, but I guess the issue is that none of the songs really stuck out for me beyond the others. Still, I'm not a huge fan of massively technical music, so my preferences lean towards those with less technical influences. Your preference is likely to vary as a result of this, so keep that in mind. Still, I'd recommend, on the top, Retrospective, Noah, and Perennial as the 4 songs I enjoyed the most. Okay, on to the more controversial of my opinions. Personally, I feel that Jinjer is at their best when they keep things simple. Yes, they are extremely talented musicians who are more than capable of pulling off technical elements, but personally I feel it doesn't work for them as well as their non-technical approaches. Or perhaps I should say I didn't enjoy those particular elements as much as I did the more simple ones. I also feel that some of the experiments on the album were a little hit and miss. Some of them really worked though. You know, the reggae section on Judgment and Punishment, for example, I felt it was a little too jarring. But if you look at the lyrical content, perhaps that was a deliberate choice. Anyway, I've been a bit critical up to this point, so I'd also like to call something out on the positive side. Some may look at the fact that there's 9 tracks that run for 42 minutes and think, well, it's a bit short. Personally, I'd like to applaud the composition on this album. There's no filler at all. Every beat, every riff, every vocal has its place, and nothing overstays its welcome. I really feel as if the band took the time to make sure that there was nothing superfluous in any track, and while some bands may repeat riffs, etc. to lengthen shorter tracks, I can only applaud the decision to cut the fat. It really has resulted in a very tight album. So, kudos to you, Jinjer. All of this is, of course, my personal opinion, which is tainted by my own likes and dislikes. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. I generally don't like mixed vocals unless they're really well implemented. And I'm not a massive fan of technical elements, both of which work against my appreciation of this album. Although the vocals, I must say, are quite good. They do mix them quite well. And again, that's probably due to the composition. All of that said, I did really enjoy Macro. It's a good album that for some may be brilliant and potentially contender for Album of the Year, but for me, it ranks as just an enjoyable 2019 metal release. I do recommend you have a listen, even if, like me, you would usually be reticent to do so. There are some clever ideas that are realised on this album, and I do think Jinjer has a really bright future. So, how many mad capsules would I give Macro? If you're astute and you know my rating mentality and system, then you'll already know that I would give this album 3 mad capsules. I like it, but it didn't blow me away, and I'm not likely to listen to it much further as the year progresses. Not because it doesn't deserve to be listened to again, but more so because there have been some real rippers that have been released just this year, and there's likely a few more to come before the year is out, so it may just get replaced by other albums, sadly. Let me know your thoughts on this review. Feel free to agree or disagree, but remember this is just my opinion, so let's be civil. If there's anything you'd like me to look at, let me know, but keep in mind that my time is very limited, so I will choose pretty damn carefully. At present, I do plan to review the new Blood Incantation album in late November, but I should have time to do 1 or 2 others prior to then. Just keep in mind that my preference is to focus on new releases, unless there's a very good reason to do otherwise. Easiest way to get in touch with me to make requests is via Facebook or Twitter, and the links are in my channel banner, so feel free to reach out and say hello. I won't bite much. Anyway, that's it for this week's Madcap music review. Thanks for hanging around, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.